Welcome to Off Watch, our weekly interview series. This week, I got a chance to sit down with Chris Nicholson, somebody who's been there at every twist and turn in the last 6 editions of the race. I asked him about Team Vestas Wind and that fateful grounding on St Brandon's Reef, plus Movistar's sinking and what it takes to be a leader in those times of crisis. Plus, I got a chance to ask him about his early 18-foot skiff days and the 49er Olympics and what it takes to be fast in those classes. If you enjoy this interview, leave us a like, subscribe for more, and let us know in the comments below who you want us to talk to next. Enjoy. Joining me this week is Chris Nicholson, who has represented Australia in 2 Olympic Games, got 6 World Championship titles to his name, but closer to home, has competed in every edition of the ocean race since 2001. In the last edition, on board Team Axonabel, they finished 4th, but more importantly, well, at least as much as the history books are concerned, they got the outright speed record for the most number of miles sailed in 24 hours, 602, the new benchmark to beat. So, Chris, thank you very much for joining me. First of all, give us some idea what it's like being on board a 65 when it's maxed out, claiming a record, surfing, jumping from wave to wave.
Yeah, I know. Well, I guess, first of all, most of the way through that record, I actually didn't believe that we were doing the amount of miles that we actually did in the end. You can't do a record like that without everything being very, very close to perfectly aligned. You know, the conditions were incredible, flat water, a little bit of current with us, the right sail combination, good drivers, good trimmers, and just a nice setup and pushing the boat, on its edge the whole time. Like, the best fun you have while going racing in it, but also not the hardest of sailing either. Like, there's been a lot harder days at 400 or 500 miles than that record at 602.
Because normally if a boat goes out to break a record, you're talking about a team being sat, on the dockside, watching the weather for days, maybe weeks, waiting for that perfect weather window. It's not, I imagine it's not going to come around again in the race's future that the boats are on the perfect angle, sailing in just the right direction with just the right wind. As you say, everything lines up.
Exactly. I can imagine at the time there was a lot of people with big ocean-going maxis that had always geared up for the world record, and them just being absolutely destroyed. That we come out with a little 65-footer and nail it.
And what's the 65s had a reputation in the last 2 editions of being quite wet, but of course also being quite robust, being very sturdy, boats that you could really throw into it. They're going to be doing another edition. What can we expect from the 65 next time around? It was so close in the last edition. Is it going to get closer? Is someone going to unlock something and pull away finally?
Well, the only way you could get closer is, instead of there being, 3 or 4 boats neck and neck at the finish, that there'll be, 8 boats. It can't. I honestly think it's more of the same, but also more of the same. That combination was dynamic last race, in terms of people who viewed it, the atmosphere around the race, and just the and you talk to the sailors. It's the best race for me. It was the best racing I've had in my career. Was the last race.
Why is that? Why did that one stand so far above the others?
Well, it was purely just, if you're just breaking it down to just simple racing, go out and racing, where you don't have to have done, years of design work and had everything perfectly in place. If you want to just go and race the next group of guys and put yourself against those people, that was the best race.
Because of course, what was it, 2001? That was when you were first involved in the race, and this is Amateur Sports 1. You coming in as watch leader. So, with the
Oh no,
70s.
no, 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 no. Sorry, mate. I didn't. I definitely didn't start as watch lead. I was pretty much. I think I was pretty much sweeping the floor when I started there with adults.
Okay, fine. That's fine. I'll readjust.
I ended up watch leader. How about we'll leave it at that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect. I mean, what was that like? I try and get my head around what it's like sailing on the 65 now. Let's say you lose a leg, but you know that you've got just as good equipment as the person that won. Your boat has the potential to go just as fast as their boat. You sail on board something like the Volvo 70s as a bit of a design thing. Is there something in your mind when a boat doesn't perform and you think, well, our boat is different? I mean, it's designed differently. How does that affect that your mindset in that situation?
Yeah, the Volvo 70. It comes into its own in regards to all the pre-race design work and sailing and refits. So you get to actually add a lot of value from a sailor and with design side of it to the project. So that can become quite. It's really rewarding and great fun. If you're going to boil the race down to the most amount of fun, probably the 70 is it, because it's the full package. It's not just racing, it's design, it's more preparation and the refit. All that work comes into it to ultimate speed. So they're such a dynamic program, the 70s, but they had their day in the sun. They were fantastic boats to sail. They really were quite a handful, I've got to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes with its risk, doesn't it? I mean, this is probably where I should ask you about Movistar and, having to step off that boat in a way that no sailor wants to do, stepping into a life raft. Take us back to that moment there. When were you on board that? But, when did things first start to feel we might have an issue here?
Oh, honestly, that was. Remember, we almost sunk coming into the Horn. Like that was very, very close to quite a rapid loss of the boat. So it wasn't the first moment. When we finally did step into the raft, honestly, was a accumulation of several problems that we'd had throughout the race. Sorry about the kids.
It's fine. Yeah, we're catching you at home. That's not a problem. Because you'd had to. So the keel ram was ultimately the thing that sort of seemed to sort of sink the boat. And I mean, this is obviously going back a while. This is long before my involvement with the race. So I've always been sort of trying to get the details from the scraps from press releases and stuff. But you guys were having to tie the keel up at one point, trying to sort of slow it down.
Yeah. Well, I guess if we take it back, very tragically throughout one of the nights, we got a call that Hans Horowitz had gone over the side from ABN1. So I think we dropped we got rid of the fractional zero I think we had up at the time, and started to reach across to where we thought the search site would be. And we're leaping off waves and the usual things you do. And we landed hard, pretty hard, and literally the back keel pin snapped through the bulkhead and basically sort of dropped the back end of the keel out of the boat, if you like. So it's kind of still attached by the rams and the front pin, but it's terminal. So we slowed the boat down. Then we tried to do what we could. We had a fair amount of water coming back in. So we've essentially stopped the boat. We've tried to. It's still relatively secure, I guess you would say. It's probably moving about, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 inches sideways, flopping around in the boat, which is never a good look.
No,
for a keel.
no. For a component that's not meant to move at all, 3, 4, 5 inches is a lot.
Exactly. So so we started to, like putting into place all the crisis documents that we have. But as far as remembering, this went on for probably, I don't know, a day and a half, where we're still on the boat and we're trying to secure the keel to a certain extent to try and get back to shore. So we did. We were drilling holes in the bulkhead and trying to lash up the keel pin through the bulkhead. Then we're drilling, and then so we're doing purchase system with all the kite sheets, halyards, you name it. And then we're drilling holes through the deck to then put it onto a halyard so we could winch the purchase systems tighter and tighter.
Right.
And like there's huge forces at play, but we threw pretty much everything at it. And then, because we knew we had to do a jibe in, like a day's time, and that the keel would flop over at that time. So we're trying to secure it. So we kind of, and everyone's in survival suits and we're ready to get in the rafts. And so we are organized. And so we eventually go for the jibe, and the keel just flops to the side and just tears every rope through the bulkhead. We didn't even scratch it. and it's like, you're just going, well, we knew it was, we'd worked on it for a long time, all of us, and we knew it was probably futile, but
you'd like it to give some resistance. You'd like it to last for a split second at least.
Yeah, you do. But there's a reason why these things are, like originally, but it was one of those ones where, like when you backtrack through the engineering and through the breakages that we'd had previous in the race, you could see a definite line, the same old snowball effect. You could see where it originated, and it didn't happen there. It originated, a long time prior to that, and it just and we never really got on top of it until and the final outcome is you end up losing a boat.
Was it scary? I mean, I'm imagining, like you say, Hans Horowitz, the tragedy with him was just unfolded. What was that like, being on board a boat and knowing that, well, we can't rely on this boat much any longer?
Yeah, certainly. Like the weather conditions were playing havoc. We had a 40 knot front due to come over us in sort of like a day and a half's time, and if there had been reasonable conditions, for sure we could have limped back to shore. But then when you get caught with a passing front with a leftover seaway, it would have. I'm pretty confident it would have ended very badly if we'd stuck it out. So were we scared? It was quite a controlled event as such to that time. ABN1 was there nearby, circling around. We've had a lot of time to prepare for getting into the raft, so it was all quite well organised as such. If we had lost the boat like we almost did coming into the Horn, which was a very rapid flooding of the vessel, that one had to put a bit of a scare factor on it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Your first time in a life raft, albeit short, considering you're transferring to another boat?
Yep, that was. Possibly not my last, but that was the first time.
Well, because this was one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and I always ask you about this whenever I get the chance to speak to you, and I do apologise.
You've apologised in the past too, but you keep making mistake, mate.
So the thing that I think we end up touching on next is probably the St. Brandon Reef, and being on board with Team Vestas Wind and running aground, and there's a lot that I think is really fascinating about that story, not least the strains that it must have put on you in terms of being skipper at that moment. I was wondering whether, before we kind of get onto what happened there that night and how you guys dealt with it, I was wondering whether there was, with the Movistar incident, was there anything that you saw being done from a leadership point of view, from, you know, the way that that situation was controlled, that you thought, I'm going to note that down. That was good. Looking back, that's how I'd like to do it if I get into that situation myself.
Yeah, I'd never thought of it in this context before. As in, for sure, there's, I think, things you pick up along your career and your life, just in terms of just experience and dealing with different situations. So that all plays a part of it. One thing in looking back now that we had a lot of on Movistar was time, and certainly with Vestas, the main, I remember a lot of the decision making that was going on was, it was very much based off crew, a lot of crew input, as much as I could get, and of course then I'd make the final decision. But I remember at the time just really just trying to buy myself some more time to get to the better decision. Some things that had to happen early on, as soon as we hit, that were instant decisions. This is what we'll do. But as soon as you could buy some time, it certainly made for a better outcome. Absolutely.
So talk us through then, like you say, I can see now why you say time. It splits those two incidences, one evolving relatively slowly and the other one happening in the blink of an eye. Before we talk about what you did after the moment, what happens here? You know, we've got Team Vestas win, sailing along, sailing well, leg 2 at night. Take it from there.
Well, like we'd gone through quite a big storm the previous night. So it was quite a leftover sea. But the main thing was that we knew about some seamounts that were, a fair way off, a day and a half, 2 days out. We knew these seamounts were there. Mistake that was made was that we didn't zoom in on the depths of the seamounts enough to know that they were more than just seamounts. The information that we had was that it was still 40 meters of depth. Obviously it wasn't. It was about 3 meters above sea level. So but even at that, even a depth differential, of 1,200 meters, from the deep to the shallow, is concerning, and I was obviously still quite concerned about wave state, currents, everything around there. So we were preparing for that. So obviously as we were approaching the seamount, which everybody kind of knew that there could, there'd be maybe, like, you'll see some difference in sea state potentially in this area. And then literally, we didn't know it at the time, we accelerated down a wave as such, which would be a breaking wave on the edge of the reef, and hit. So one thing you find out later on, if you're going to ground a boat, a canting keel is a good boat to ground on, because the keel's out to the side, the boat spins around, albeit violently, but it doesn't impact like a fixed keel and just instantly stop. So a lot of the inertia was taken around in a sweeping corner, which sheared off both rudders. I think maybe one or both actually got torn out of the boat, as well as broken. And literally, we're there fixed, like instantly. Not high and dry. We were fixed in the breaking waves.
Water coming into the hull?
Yeah, yep, straight away.
And what?
Not huge amounts at that stage. There'd probably be two reasons for that. Is one, that the keel, to a certain extent, is stopping you going deeper down.
Yeah.
But also, like, we hadn't sustained huge damage, like, to the underbody of the boat, but that was happening pretty fast then over the next 6 hours, I guess.
I imagine as a skipper, you spend so much time thinking about the polars and sail crossovers and all this sort of thing, and how you're going to perform under certain scenarios and how you're going to communicate the right tactical information to the team, when actually probably the biggest test will be the test that maybe some skippers will never have to face. They'll be lucky like that. You faced it, you're there with this team, and something's gone wrong, and now you've kind of slipped over from it's all about going fast to, well, people are looking to me now to sort of lead us in this situation where I'm sure it's got to be taken pretty seriously. Looking back, in that first sort of little few hours that you had, or even in that first moment, did you do anything where, looking back, you can go, yeah, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the way that we pulled together, the way that we did. How did that first sort of hour or moment unfold?
Well, I guess I'll just take it a couple of steps there. Like, to be honest, like a modern skipper's, I honestly think 80% of a modern skipper's role in this race is to do with sailing. Is to do with the safety of the vessel.
Yeah.
Like, so much in it, but not say specifically, obviously, for grounding, but it's everything from burns to the crew, to injuries, to safety on shore, to, like, it's kind of stops with the skipper. So, like, honestly, the polars and the sail shapes and everything is just such is yes, at the moment when you're on the boat, you got focus on that, but the overall package, it's 80% safety and procedures to try and stop this kind of thing happening. Obviously, we had big pitfalls for us to make that mistake in the first place. But having once we'd made that initial, like, very, horrendous error, everything after that, I think, was done quite well. Could we have done some small things better? Yeah, I guess so. We had a long, both internal and external debrief on it when we did, and we didn't we didn't uncover too many things.
Yeah.
We possibly could have, one big thing is we possibly could have stayed on the boat the whole time, because we did leave the boat and physically get washed over the reef individually while tethered onto a line. And we could have probably rode it out in hindsight, but and I remember talking to Will Oxley on Alvimatica at the time, and like we were saying, obviously we're both agreeing that we want to stick it out on the boat till daylight, and it's obvious, stay on the boat. It's kind of one of the things you get taught as a little kid, capsizing out on the lake, and so we wanted to stay on the boat, but we got hit by a couple of waves in quick succession, and the bulb had come off the fin, and the boat heeled over to 90 degrees, so we're basically vertical, and I was very concerned that we were going to cop another one and the boat roll, and so it's kind of like, a little bit different to a normal grounding, where, again, a fixed keel the keel stays attached, so the boat is always going to remain upright. As soon as I had the feeling that we were going to take a full tumble, that was when we had to when I decided that we did need to get off.
There was some amazing footage I remember seeing of you guys inside the hull, counting through numbers. Is everybody here? And sort of bouncing through. And I remember seeing it, and I remember thinking, well, you don't look phased. You seemed really calm. You seemed really, really relaxed. I imagine in that situation, that was how you wanted to come across to the crew. What was going on inside that you didn't want to let out, or were you that calm?
Oh no, like I was calm, like, because to be honest, if you're going to get upset and yell and scream or panic, then it's not going to reach the best outcome. Like, so you're very methodical about what has to happen, and what's on the line. I'd be lying if I didn't say a couple of times I had a little voice on my shoulder saying, "You're in deep shit." Like, really, it was one of those voices that honestly, I've never had that feeling before in my life, and I haven't had it since. But I needed to consciously sort of push those thoughts away.
Because I'm imagining when the sun comes up, and obviously you're not where you want to be, but there you are on the photos from the morning. It's a honeymoon destination. It's a beautiful spot. It's absolutely gorgeous. At what point did you manage to, okay, I've got us through it, and we're going to be okay? When did that moment come for you?
It would have been actually, wouldn't have been until we got onto the sandy part of the atoll, which was 5 miles away. Because like, even when we got into the lagoon, that night the Coast Guard that we could speak to basically said, don't get in the water because the amount of sharks. Like, so even when we were in the lagoon, I didn't, you actually didn't know, because it was quite shallow when we kind of got washed bodily over into the lagoon. It was quite shallow, like up to your waist, but I still didn't really know at that stage if that's still plenty of sharks, which there were, but they were the small sharks. If you jump off in the deep side,
just the small sharks. You're talking to a Brit. We don't have sharks, and
Yeah. But if you jump off on the deep side where we crashed the boat, you don't come back out, because there were, it is heavily shark infested there.
Let's turn to something a little bit lighter then, because
because you're a dead set party at the moment, Noel.
There was just one thing you mentioned before. We were just saying about, you're taught as a kid, you capsize your dinghy, you stay with it. And it reminded me of something. Many a day sailing as a child, and it being light wind, too windy, whatever, we're not going to go sailing today. And so what the instructor would pull out a video, Awesome Aussie Skiffs, and put it on. And that was you. You were there sailing on these 18-foot skiffs. I think
you've got your timings mixed up, because you look a whole lot older than that. Oh.
No, you see, this is the wonderful thing, because I was still very much a beginner sailor, still into my 20s. So don't worry about that.
Nice.
But for you as an Australian sailor, speaking for myself, as a British sailor, we're sailing the slowest wooden, horrible boats. We're learning to sail in Wellington boots and everything. And then you look over to what you guys were doing with the Australian sailing on 18-foot skiffs and all the rest of it. It's just seemed like an incredible proving ground, and where you're getting such an early introduction to speed and really sort of high-class sailing. You were sailing the 49er when it was fresh off the design table.
Yeah. I guess 49. Yeah, we stayed out of it for a little while, while they were sorting the design out a bit more. But we were racing 18s, and like just the time of your life. Like,
Yeah.
well, we were young, and someone was paying us a small amount of money to race boats and travel around the countryside, and they were really challenging boats as well. Like, I kind of I didn't, my growing up was kind of in local boats, sort of like they're called VJs, and then 16-foot skiffs, but no wings, and then 505s and lasers, and but then we kind of stepped straight into the 18s, and somehow the promoter Bill McCartney accepted us to sail the 18 literally the same year. Normally you had to do 2 or 3 seasons proving yourself sailing of a weekend. And somehow, I'm not sure why he did it, but he let us go on the TV basically in the first year. So we had quite a learning to do over the winter before that. And yeah, we went okay first year, and then went upwards from there.
It seemed like a kind of a glory moment in sailing in terms of televised sailing. I mean, it's still used today. People still know. I mean, I could sit here and I can embarrass myself by quoting the lines from the commentators back to you. Did you know at the point that, yeah, this is the best of our sport, and this is going to live for some years to come?
Well, honestly, there was one thing that it taught me when it was over. It really taught me when it was over and finished to appreciate what you have, what you're doing at the time, and how special it is. Because I was so wound up in trying to develop the boat faster, in working on our crew work, our tactics, video footage. I was so focused on all of that I forgot or didn't even realize and understand what a special thing we were doing. So that's where now, when I'm doing, the Volvo and the ocean race, it's like, take a moment and appreciate what you have and what you're doing. It's because it's not normal, and it's privileged.
And it's fair to say that you are definitely addicted. As I said at the beginning, you've done every single edition of the race since 2001, 6 editions. You are hoping to do the next one. And one of the things I think that's been interesting, I want to kind of pick your brains on that, because, you were saying about skipper roll, 80% is actually safety. I wonder what part of that final 20% is going to be the sailing, when something that, you've spoken to me about before, the logistical side and the planning side and the corporate side as well plays such a big role. Has that been a lesson that you've had to learn along the way? How much actually managing this team? I mean, it must feel a bit like a business at times.
Well, it is absolutely 100%. And I guess I probably need to quantify. Like the safety, it comes into everything. Where you've got to, for instance, you have a corporate day, then you've got to make sure your guests are looked after from, like that they're going to be looked after from literally when they leave the hotel to when they come to the boat, to when they're talking to the guys, that no one gets hurt, procedures in place. So everything has there's a reason why everything is done the way it is done, for the team to look professional, to give the correct image that it should be, and to do a good job. So there's plenty going on, and that's one of the things that does make it, it's a constant challenge. There's always a problem lurking around the corner that needs to be fixed, needs to be prevented as well.
Do you still get a bit of a thrill doing those corporate days, taking somebody on board, putting them on a 65, and getting a chance maybe to remind yourself, like you said, this is quite cool. This is not an everyday boat. Because, I mean, I've seen you sailing with some guests before, and I've seen the smiles.
Yeah, like absolutely. We're kind of, I think we're fortunate because the guests that come out with us, you almost 99% of them follow the race. They know the race, so they're already to a certain extent engaged. But I remember last year with Axon Oval, but we did a lot of guest sailing and a European tour. And I think it was had five people throughout that experience, like, literally in tears, saying that this was their dream to sail on a Volvo Ocean Race boat. It was their dream. And it's like, and I'd say to the crew, like, it's not to be taken lightly, when doing these days, that how important this is to do well and do right. Like, it's just unique. I don't know any other sport that guests can have that level of interaction with the athletes at the time. Like, it should be an experience of a lifetime for them, because, like, I think we've got the best people in the world on these great boats doing an event that is extreme, and we can bring the public there with us, and we televise it, and we put it out there, and they're real stories. It's not reality. It's not the crappy reality TV we see. It's real. I think we've got such a good platform.
I wonder, the OBRs, the onboard reporters for the last edition, we got to see all the amazing footage coming into the office. What did you experience of what that role was like for them, tucked into the back of the boat, constantly waking you up when we were asking for interviews?
I've always pretty much enjoyed the OBRs, like kind of, but I think I've also got it from day one, how important they were, and to integrate them into the crew. We did have a bit of a science experiment last race where we had different OBRs each time, and you probably know I wasn't a fan of that, and I don't think we got the best out of it. But in the previous races before, where the OBR becomes part of the literally part of the same team, then that we're able to also drive the OBR to a certain extent to work harder, to do more. You don't ever get to control the content, though. Like we always had a rule on board that if there was something that a crew didn't want to have, for some reason, didn't want it to go out, I could veto it, but I've never had to use that at any stage. So there's never been we've never had to control any OBR content, but it's part of working with the OBR to try and for us to deliver a better package as well. If you don't get on well with the OBR, I've seen people just put up walls, and nothing much gets out then. And like we've always had, I think, really successful OBRs on the boats have been on.
Quite apart from the corporate side of it, I am imagining that at the time, I'm sure it must get a little bit frustrating, somebody sticking a camera in your face saying, "You're losing, what's happening? You're like, not now." But when you look back, it must be quite nice that you go, I've got all these memories, photographs and videos, it's all catalogued. You can almost kind of relive your, all these past editions.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for one of these days, I guess I'll sit down and have a look at some of the stunts that have gone on in the past. But I don't know. I don't mind it, because it's real. It's what's happening. Like it's just, I can remember on camper with Hoops, Hamish Hooper. You know, it was he'd never gone around the world, and you know he's seasick. And I remember the leg from Auckland to Edersheim, and we severely damaged the boat at literally Point Nemo. And he was there, sort of sitting in the media station beside the nav station, listening to the phone calls, and the phone calls were pretty full on in regards to, you know, at that stage, you know, we had to plan for worst case scenario if we did lose the boat, because we had sustained some pretty big injuries to the boat. You know, we were having to talk survival time in the water to pick up time with another boat and all the rest of it. So, you know, and he was there kind of filming it, doing his thing, you know, petrified of what could happen. And you know, but it's real. There's nothing to be, I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of. It's just part of, you know, this is the race. It's not, you know, it is, I'm not sure. It's like, how would you just, it's just, it is extreme at times.
I think of all the holidays that I've been on, and I take all the photos when the sun is out, and when it was, you know, when it was a hard day in the mountains or whatever. Oh, you don't tend to take the photographs then because the weather's not nice. Is it good for someone like yourself to be able to show people this is why we do it, because of this challenge, because of this, how hard it is? I wonder how you've seen the fact that the public can really see what you guys are up against.
I honestly still don't think we've touched on it anywhere near, like we're taking it to the extent that we have. You know, everybody's finally seen now a glimpse of what the boats can do with the drone footage.
Yeah.
And the challenge I keep saying to the OBRs is, if you can deliver what we're going through as a person and as a sailor, if you can deliver that to the public, you will win the OBR prize, guaranteed. Like, because I still don't think we've done that job properly. Like you just, you know, we don't have the ability yet to show you the stresses and the limits of what the guys are operating under. You know, like I don't think we even, you know, like we have the best, you know, you can have the best drivers and trimmers in the world, and you can watch them right on the limit, you know, right on their limit the whole time. But it's how you get that, how you try and get that to the public, where you understand that these are the best people you can find on the planet, and it's they're on their edge, and they're doing it for a long time, and we still haven't. It's kind of, I don't know, it must be like the perfect wave. We're still searching for how to do that better, and yeah, we've made inroads, but we still haven't quite got there.
I completely understand what you're saying. One of the things that always made me sort of shiver was when we were covering the race, and they're really pushing the boat hard. They're really pushing the boat. You know, what does that mean? You know, what is that? What are you actually doing there? And you know, one of the things I wanted to ask you was, when you're down in something like the Southern Ocean, and you are pushing the boat hard, at what point do you go, I've got to jibe this boat? And I've jibed boats before, and I'll jibe boats again in the future. It's just a jibe. I know what to do. When you're down, you know, in the midst of this race, really trying to find those little edges, do you think in a way that is, okay, this maneuver, this is really big. We are a long way from home. If things go wrong, obviously there's consequences. Or is the racing mindset simply, this is just a jibe, here we go?
There's a little bit of both, you know, that kind of balance will change depending on the conditions. You know, like we've had jibes that take 45 minutes to do, in terms of the conditions are so hard and changing the stack and everything. It's literally can be a 45-minute procedure to do well, to do right. But that's still a racing jibe. That's as fast as it gets.
Yeah.
It just takes you that long, and your prep time, and you're going through it. So yeah, no, like there's I think maybe what you're alluding to is a bit more of when does the switch get flicked from flat out racing to to slow it down. Let's just get through it, and that can happen straight line. It can happen jibing prior to a jibe, and it's not a tapered one. It's not a tapered flick of the switch either. It's usually you're on the limit, and something just. And you're on the limit, and something just tweaks it just that little bit too much, and it's like, shut it down, flick the switch, and fill the sail up, chill out. For however long, might only be 30 seconds, might be an hour, or might be longer. But yeah, it does happen, and it's a pretty, for me anyway, it's a pretty clear flicking of the switch.
Have you maybe come off the helm in a moment like that and realized that the adrenaline is pumping, the heart rate is racing, just like, you've sort of taken your car around a corner and it's skidded a little bit? I'm wondering, do you get those moments? And if you do, how long do they last? Is it half an hour at that heightened emotion?
Yeah, but if it's windy enough, like the last race, the Southern Ocean, was a really windy leg, and I can remember us taking a couple of sort of hard knockdowns. Luckily they were always a broach; they were never a Chinese jibe, and you're. The boats are pretty tough. Everyone's clipped on, so everyone's relatively safe. And you kind of you know the risk. It is there, but I think it's controllable. I remember steering, and there was a front due to come over, and we'd taken a knockdown, just before I got on the wheel. And I was full on at the end of my whatever skills I have. And we got another gust of like 50 knots. And this is in the middle of the night, and they'd just gone, nah, got to furl it. And when we furled the fractional up, and it was just like, it was really like full on, and you just kind of think back, could I've toughed it out and any longer? And you kind of think now in hindsight you could, but at the time I couldn't, and you have to, you're comfortable with that decision. And it's just, I keep kind of saying to the guys, it's almost, like, I don't know if it's a testosterone thing or whatever it is, but it's like you get a group of professionals together like that, and no one wants to be thinking they're letting their team down or anything like that. But I keep trying to say, it's kind of, it's almost the smarter, better person that will put their hand up and say, I'm done here. We take it to a different analogy where, we're trying to have the fastest drivers, trimmers all the time. And sometimes, you might be not real comfortable steering, and you might be slower than the boat beside you or whatever. And it takes, people, we always try and really force into everybody, like, put your hand up. If you're not comfortable, if you think this isn't your best place to be, put your hand up, and we replace, and we just move around and we shuffle the crew, and we get going better. And it's kind of like, it's easy to say, but it's a fairly hard thing to do. No one wants to put their hand up and say, I'm not I'm not good enough at this point in time. And that takes a while to try and get into the crew. Like, we'd have times in the last race where, like, some boats had some serious speed on certain angles, and we just couldn't get there. And then all of a sudden we'd be fast, and trying to get that magical combination 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is the trick. But like, you got to have, you have a good team of people that can acknowledge their own strengths and weaknesses. It goes a long way.
Let's talk about one of the challenges that you were saying, that as the OBRs and the way that we cover the race, we're not really able to get the public to understand or to see. I understand that you are somebody that suffers from seasickness pretty badly. Now, I suffer from seasickness, and I can't imagine going out on a long voyage of a couple of hours with the kind of seasickness that I suffer from. I mean, have you always had this? And does it kick in during the race, or is it a case of I'm too busy, my stomach doesn't have time?
No, I've always had it, but I've gotten better with it. Obviously, if I was as got as seasick today as I did during my first round the world race, I wouldn't be doing it. That first race I suffered pretty badly, I got to say. And there's a lot of things then, maybe, like, at the time I didn't think I'm pretty certain I wasn't stressed, but maybe a bit apprehensive, and that doesn't help. And the wrong food and the wrong medication. I kind of take like an over-the-counter medication, now if it's rough. And I don't know. I can feel crook, but I've got to manage it, and quite often. But it's pretty hard if you're, doing a lot of emails and looking at weather and other boats downstairs, in this circus ride that's going on downstairs, and you just, you can, I've had a few projectile vomits, I've got to say, I'm afraid.
No, I completely understand. I would be worse.
But you actually have an agreement with me, if I think right now, that before the next race, if I'm there, you're actually coming out for a couple of days. So whilst we're here now, you can actually announce it to the rest of the world if you like.
We did talk about this, and the thing that I remember was you said, look, you got to do a transatlantic, you got to do something with us so you can learn the boat. And when I said to you, I'd be worried about how you would treat me on board, your reply was, as in you'd overwork me. Your reply was, don't worry, I will treat you just the same as I would treat all of the crew, which is exactly what I'm getting at, because I'm a long time past my physical peak. And even then it wasn't much of a peak. I would do it, and I'm fully happy to commit to it now, provided that I would be able to tap out at any time. I could bring my own food, luxuries, things like that. If I'm feeling very seasick, I get to sleep on deck, somewhere dry, maybe somewhere comfortable. If you could arrange that, I don't know what you could do. But I guess those would be my conditions.
Yeah, mate, you signed up.
Okay, great. Okay, right. That didn't go the way I planned.
No.
Right. One thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that first time around the world, and you mentioned how green you were, excuse the pun, in terms of seasickness and in terms of potentially some of your experiences. All of us would look back to some sailing that we've done in the past and think, wow, I can't believe that I used to not know this skill, or I used to think that was the right way to do it. For somebody that's done this race, 6 laps of the planet, I know that, what were you, 24 when you won your first world championship in the 505? I mean, it's quite a strong start from a young sailor. But when you look back, is there something that you can stick a pin in to show how much you as a sailor have developed, how far you've come?
I think that first Volvo, there's probably two moments. It's that first Volvo that I did, and it wasn't so much like, it wasn't like a I joined that team, and previously I'd just done one overnighter here off the New South Wales coast in Australia before I joined that team. One overnighter, and I'd never steered boats with a wheel, and I'd never looked at instruments. And then I joined that team, and oh boy, and it was brutal. I got to say, like Dalt's, it was Dalt's program, and Bowers, their co-skipper, and it was just like, like, I like those guys, but there wasn't a lot of help for the young guy. I was seriously sink or swim. Like you had to. It was pretty hardcore, I got to say, and it wasn't until halfway round that race that I thought that I was actually starting to do a reasonable job. Like, and I was, and the part that did it for me was that, then you kind of had 6 drivers, and I was one of the 6 drivers, and we had a really windy section for several days, and we just go down to 3 drivers as such. So there was on that leg, there was myself, Bauer, and Paul Kayard, and we were the 3 drivers rotating, overlapping out of the watch system to try and handle this amount of breeze, this level of sailing. So you're kind of like, you're pushing yourself, young bloke with plenty of energy, you're pushing yourself pretty darn hard. And, that was kind of that was a moment in that race that I understood that, like, what a true test it is in regards to your sport. And it tests you in so many areas other than just, standing behind steering a boat. And then the other moment actually was a big moment for me, was this last race, and it was my 5th time round Cape Horn. I guess 6 counting one in training, but I just remember, finally having a bit of a moment and just going, wow, like the things that have gone on to have been able to sail around such an iconic place, and just the journey to get that far to do, and the stories and the troubles and the good times and everything to do that. And I was pretty, I don't know, it's one of the rare times that you kind of can sit back and think, I'm happy with what I've been able to do so far. I used to see this stuff as a kid in the books about the early explorers and everything. To think, end up doing 5 times around, never even thought about it. Not once, not even to do once, but 5 times. Yeah, that's why I got the grey hair.
Well, the sun's coming up here. I can see that the sun is going down where you are. We saw your family in the background before, so I'm guessing you've got duties away from dreaming about, the next edition of the race. So, Chris, thank you very much for that. That's a beautiful note to leave it on. We'll let you get back to family life, and we'll see you on the water soon.
Cheers, Noel. Thanks, mate.
Well, my thanks to Chris Nicholson, and hopefully you enjoyed that very candid look on what it's been like to be there at some of those big moments in the races past. If you enjoyed this interview, subscribe for more. We'll have plenty more coming up in the next few months. And of course, you can leave us a comment below as to who you think we should be talking to next. See you next time.